Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to learn something about neoplasia. Neoplasia, it means new growth. Obviously, neo means new. The word tumor was originally applied to the swelling caused by inflammation, but now it's almost exclusively used for the word neoplasia. Oncology is the study of tumors and neoplasia, obviously, and cancer, as we all know, is a term for all malignant neoplasia. This is the definition of neoplasia, which we have learned from Robbins. It is a neoplasia is an abnormal mass of tissue, the growth of which exceeds and is uncoordinated with that of normal tissue and persists in the same excessive manner after cessation of stimuli which evoke the change. Okay, this is from Robbins and we have to learn this. Molecular pathology, a neoplasm can be defined as a disorder of cell growth. It is triggered by a series of acquired mutations. These acquired mutations we will learn. Some of them are called Java mutations, some of them are called placental mutations. We will learn about them. A series of acquired mutations affecting a single cell and its clonal progeny. Now, components. All the neoplasms, whether benign or malignant, they have two components. One is the parenchyma, the main tumor neoplastic cells, and the reactive stroma, which usually don't matter much. The reactive stroma is composed of the connective tissue, blood vessels, and cells of the adaptive and immune system. So, the classification of the biological behavior of tumors, it is based on the parenchymal component, that is the tumor neoplastic cells. Okay. But the tumor growth and spread, it also depends on the stroma of the tumor. If the stroma is too fibrous, then it might not spread to other areas. Some tumors have scant connective tissue and are soft and stretchy. Okay. And some with abundant collagenous stroma, this is called as desmoplasia. Some tumors, they exhibit this phenomenon known as desmoplasia. What happens is there is intense fibrosis of this stroma. So you get collagen there. So an example will be serous breast carcinoma. Now, classification on biological behavior for neoplasms. So, on the basis of biological behavior and morphological characteristics, they can be divided into benign tumor and malignant tumor. A tumor is benign when the gross and macroscopic appearance is innocent. Obviously, it's very vague. Okay, even malignant neoplasms might sometimes look innocent, but only in macroscopy you will be able to discern whether they are benign or malignant. A benign tumor will remain localized and will not spread to other sites. There are exceptions to this rule, like tumor adenoma. It is also locally very aggressive, and local surgical removal is possible. It also has its own exceptions. A patient having benign tumor generally survives. Again, it has its exceptions. Benign tumors are designated by attaching the suffix "oma" to the name of the cell type from which the tumor originates, like fiber to fibroma. If we have any this benign tumor originating in cartilage, we will call it chondroma, and this adipocytes, then it's lipoma. Now, adenoma is benign epithelial neoplasm derived from columnar epithelium or gland. A papilloma is benign epithelial tumor producing macroscopically visible finger-like projection from epithelial surfaces. A polyp is a non-neoplastic or neoplastic macroscopically visible projection. Okay, a polyp is usually macroscopically visible. You don't have to look for it macroscopically. Visible projection above a mucosal surface. Like this is a polyp. Macroscopically, it will also be visible, though we are seeing it macroscopically. It has arisen from this colonic lesion. Malignant tumors are collectively referred to as cancer, obviously. They invade and destroy adjacent structures and spread to distant sites, which we call metastasis, and it might cause death. The nomenclature. Those arising from this mesenchymal tissue or the stroma, which we usually say, are known as sarcomas, like fibrosarcoma, chondrosarcoma, leiomyosarcoma, and rhabdomyosarcoma. Alright, chondrosarcoma is from cartilage, which we know already. Leiomyosarcoma, you will find them in uterus and all. The malignant tumors arising, tumors arising from blood-forming cells are designated leukemia, lymphoma. Lymphoma you will find in Indian lymph nodes, and maybe in some other this external nodal lymph organs. But leukemia, it's this thing of blood. We have chronic myeloid leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia. Malignant tumors arising from epithelial cell origin known as carcinoma, like squamous cell carcinoma, adenocarcinoma. They arise from epithelial cells. As I have already explained, squamous cell is a cancer arising from squamous epithelium, those flat squamous epithelium. And adenocarcinoma is a cancer arising from glandular columnar epithelium, or adenocarcinoma. It's not a necessity that it has to arise from glandular or columnar epithelium. If it forms a glandular pattern, then we can also call it adenocarcinoma. A mixed tumor, a tumor arising from a single cone of cell capable of forming epithelial cells Myxoid stroma containing cartilage and bone is called mixed tumor. Okay. Self-solved mixed tumors arise from a single germ layer, like pleomorphic adenoma of salivary gland. Like I've already told you, this pleomorphic adenoma is an aggressive tumor. Teratoma is a tumor arising from more than one germ layer. Like we have three germ layers: endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. So teratoma will arise from all the three germ layers. They are usually seen in ovary and testes. Okay, if it's benign in ovary, if it's benign, we call them dermoid cyst. Choristoma is a heterotrophic rest of normal cells. They are usually found in abnormal places. Okay, like if you find gastric mucosa in Meckel's diverticulum, that's an example. It's an example of choristoma. Hematomas are disorganized masses of cells composed of cells native to that site. Okay, so how are hematomas different from neoplasms? So neoplasms are usually monoclonal, but these hematomas are usually polyclonal. Like this is an example of a cystic teratoma. All right. So this is neural tissue. There are some fatty tissues here. So it has taken the components are from all the three germ layers, like mesoderm, endoderm, and ectoderm. These are some nomenclature of tumors like fibroma, then fibrosarcoma. Fibroma is benign, fibrosarcoma is malignant. Tumors of epithelial origin, if it arises from squamous epithelium, then squamous cell papilloma is benign, and squamous cell carcinoma is malignant. These tables have been taken from Robbins. You can find them there only. Now, benign tumor versus malignant tumor. Okay, so these are some points by which we can differentiate. You will see them. Neoplastic cell criteria. You will see that the cells are hyperchromatic and all. And rate of growth. This malignant tumors, their rate of growth is much more faster than that of benign tumor. Size of the tumor. The size of the for malignant tumor is usually more than benign tumor, but then again, there are exceptions. Hemorrhage and necrosis. This you will find more in malignant tumors because the cells are proliferating so fast that they are not getting the adequate amount of blood which they require. So they undergo necrosis. So in malignant tissues, we usually know them as tumor diastasis, capsulated or not. So benign tumors are usually capsulated. Malignant tumors are usually not capsulated. Local invasion, present or not. These malignant tumors are usually more invasive than benign tumors. But then again, there are exceptions. Metastasis. Usually, malignant tumors metastasize. And clinical effects, these are very vague. Some tumors which have oma but are not benign, like lymphoma, melanoma, and seminoma. Seminoma is tumor of testis, so it's definitely not benign. Melanoma too is definitely not benign. It's tumor of this melanocytes. And lymphoma too we know only, we have studied. Some benign tumors without capsule like hemangioma and leiomyoma. They also don't have any capsule. Locally invasive and locally malignant tumor. This basal cell carcinoma is this thing, okay? It's a malignant tumor, but they do not usually metastasize to distant areas. Now, giant cell tumor of bone like or osteoblastoma. Osteoblastoma is usually locally aggressive, but it doesn't usually metastasize to distant sites. Differentiation and anaplasia. Differentiation refers to the extent to which neoplastic tumor cells resembles the corresponding normal parenchymal cells, both morphologically and functionally. Okay. Now, lack of differentiation is called anaplasia. Lack of differentiation or anaplasia is considered as hallmark of pregnancy, obviously. Now, why does it happen? Because the tumor cells, they are proliferating so fast that they are not getting the time to look like the normal cells from which they came. So that's why we have lack of differentiation or anaplasia. So here you can see this benign tumor of thyroid, adenoma. All the follicles, they look so beautiful. They have all the colloid you can see. And they look like normal thyroid follicles only, so it's an adenoma. And this is well differentiated stem cell carcinoma. You see that this one, you can see that they look very much like the squamous cells only. So then the amount of anaplasia is very low. They are very well differentiated. Now, features of anaplasia. Number one is pleomorphism. All the cells will look very different. Okay, no two cells will be similar to one another. Abnormal nuclear morphology like increased nuclear cytoplasm ratio, variable nuclear shape, and hyperchromasia. The cells will be more bluish or more dark. In mitosis, you'll find atypical and bizarre mitotic figures, and loss of polarity, and other changes like ischemic necrosis. Like pleomorphism is known as the variation in size and shape of the cells. Cancer cells show pleomorphism. Cells range from small cell to a large atypical tumor giant cells. The tumor giant cells I will show you. Some tumor cells possess huge nucleus with two or more large hyperchromatic. This one. These are tumor giant cells. Okay, they are very large. They have abundant cytoplasm. But this is also giant cell, but this has very high and nucleocytoplasmic ratio. You can see that they show hyperchromasia. Now, abnormal nuclear morphology. A normal nucleus is large in relation to cytoplasm. Okay, Normal NS-to-C ratio is 1:4 to 1:6. In malignancy, it may approach 1:1. And then you won't be able to see the cytoplasm only. All you will see is the nucleus. The nucleus is darkly stained with coarsely clumped chromatin, which is because the chromatin takes up the intracellular stain. So in H&E preparations, they will appear very hyperchromatic. You may also find abnormally large nuclei. Okay, the mitosis. In tumors, many cells are mitosis. Like we all know, how do cells divide? Somatic cells divide by mitosis, and these germ cells divide by meiosis. So in tumors, you will find many cells which have this one at atypical bizarre mitotic figures, sometimes tripolar and quadrupolar mitosis. Then loss of polarity. The orientation of anaplastic cells is markedly disturbed. Tumor cells grow in disorganized fashion. Like if if a columnar cell is supposed to be on top of a basal cell, then it will be disturbed and you may find a basal cell in top of a columnar cell. That is loss of polarity. See this one. This shows this tripolar spindle. Okay, this is a tripolar spindle. Dysplasia means disordered growth. Okay, it is the loss. It is a loss of uniformity of the individual cells and loss of the architectural orientation. It will be precursor to malignant transformation, but it does not always progress to cancer. So these are Simon and cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. Okay, I'll show you better pictures. Carcinoma in situ. When dysplastic changes are marked and these atypical dysplastic cells across the full thickness of the epithelium, it is called carcinoma in situ. Basically, the dysplastic cells they involve the full thickness of the epithelium, but they do not invade the stroma. Okay, they're limited by the basement membrane. That's why they don't really invade or metastasize. That is carcinoma in situ. So you see this whole of the epithelium, this one and this one. Don't they look similar? The whole of the epithelium has been replaced by these atypical bizarre cells. You can see at high NC ratio, this atypical mitotic figures, this one, atypical mitotic figures, high NC ratio. And if you look at the cells or the nuclei, I should say, they show pleomorphism. No two cells look alike. They aren't of the same size and shape. And if you see these tumor cells, they are limited by the basement membrane. In this magnification, you can't appreciate that. But you can appreciate this thing that they are limited by this basement membrane. So this is carcinoma in situ. It has not invaded yet. Carcinoma situ is a malignant condition, obviously, because you can see many dysplastic cells, but these cells do not cross the basement membrane. If they cross the basement membrane, then it is invasive carcinoma. So since we don't really know when it might just invade the basement membrane, cross the basement membrane, so management of this CIS is same like invasive carcinoma. Now metaplasia, it is the replacement of one type of cell or mature cell with another type of mature cell. Okay, it is usually associated with tissue damage, repair, and regeneration. The metaplastic tissue is prone to, obviously, since the metaplastic tissue is prone to malignant transformation. This tissue, because tissue damage, repair, and regeneration occurs while regenerating, it might acquire some mutation. So that's why it is prone to malignant transformation. You see, this is normal esophageal mucosa. It has this normal static and squamous epithelium, but here you can see these glands are there. It has this one. Due to repeated this one trauma by this acid, gastric acid, it has changed into the squamous epithelium. This is the normal squamous epithelium, and this is the normal columnar epithelium. Okay, abnormal columnar epithelium actually. These are the metaplastic metaplastic cells. So this is a case of Barrett's esophagus. Barrett's esophagus is an example of metaplasia. Local invasion. The growth of cancers is accompanied by progressive invasion, destruction of surrounding tissue, and eventual systemic spread. Whereas nearly all benign neoplasms grow as cohesive extensile masses that remain localized to the site of origin, and the lack of capacity to invade or metastasize to different distant sites. Then again, we already know that there are exceptions. Benign tumors may also invade this one, nearby structures. Benign tumors are usually surrounded by capsule which consists of extracellular matrix deposited by fibroblasts. Like we have seen, the exception is hemangiomas and leiomyomas, which we already know. After metastasis, the invasiveness is the most reliable discriminator of benign tumors. Yeah, that is true. Now metastasis. It is the spread of a tumor to sites that are discontinuous with the primary tumor site, like a testicular tumor. Okay, it might spread to lymph node or supraclavicular lymph node. Now, where is testis and where is your neck? You just imagine it can spread to sites which are discontinuous with the primary tumor site. Metastasis marks a tumor malignant. Yeah. The invasiveness of cancers permits them to penetrate blood vessels, lymphatics, and body cavities, causing distant spread. all malignant tumors can metastasize, although some rarely do that, like glioma and basal cell carcinoma. Basal cell carcinoma you may get on the face. It can be locally locally invasive, but it doesn't usually metastasize, like we have already seen. Pathways of metastasis. Okay, they can spread by lymphatic spread or hematogenous spread and direct seeding of body cavity cells. This lymphatic spread is usually taken by carcinomas. Okay, carcinomas usually spread via lymphatics. Okay, the lymphatic spread involves deposition of cancer cells in the draining lymph nodes. Okay, now what happens? What is a sentinel lymph node now? It is defined as the first node in a regional lymphatic basin that receives lymph flow from the primary tumor. Okay, like in breast carcinoma, the tumor cells usually invade the axillary lymph nodes. So the first axillary lymph node which is invaded by the tumor cells will be the sentinel lymph node. So how is it important? This assessment of sentinel lymph nodes is important for assessing course of the disease and selecting suitable therapeutic strategies. Like we have modified radical mastectomy and all, where we sometimes take out all the lymph nodes from the axilla. Okay, what we do is we inject a dye, okay, in the breast, and then we look for the sentinel lymph node. The dye will go via the we take the lymphatic spread and go to the first lymph node. Okay, we take the first lymph node and then we examine it under microscope while the surgery is going on. Okay, we take it, we see it under microscope, and if we see that it has been invaded by tumor cells, then we ask the surgeons to go for total mastectomy and removal of the lymph nodes. Skip metastasis, it is metastasis bypassing the adjacent of first draining lymph node. Now hematogenous spread, it is usually taken up by sarcoma. This type of spread is typical for sarcomas. The liver, the lungs, bone marrow, these are frequently involved in hematogenous metastasis. This liver, this colonic cancers, they usually metastasize to liver because of this portal circulation. Now, seeding of body cavities and surfaces, this is third route. Vaginal cavity mostly involved in seeding pathway. Okay, but pleural, pericardial, and subarachnoid spaces may also be involved. Okay, now Krukenberg tumor of ovary. Here, the GIT cancer metastasizes to the ovary. Okay, by this vaginal cavity. And pseudomyxoma peytoni, it happens when mucus secreting carcinoma of appendix fills the peytonal cavity with gelatinous neoplastic mass. This is just a picture, okay? Epidemiology, like in 2017, almost 20% of men in the whole world have prostate cancer, prostate and in females, almost 30% have breast cancer. Breast cancer is the most common cancer in women, and this is the mortality due to cancer. Environmental factors, although both genetic and environmental factors contribute, environmental influences are dominant risk factors for most cases. Infections like HPV, it causes cervical carcinomas and juvenile papilloma of the larynx. You will get to know about it later. And hepatitis B virus and hepatitis C virus, they cause liver cancer, very common in our country. And Epstein-Barr virus, it causes Hodgkin's lymphoma. You will get to learn about it. You get that Reed-Sternberg cell in Hodgkin's lymphoma. Smoking causes cancer of not only lung, but mouth, larynx, pharynx, esophagus, pancreas, and bladder. It can cause cancer of all these: alcohol consumption, carcinoma of oropharynx, excluding lip, larynx, esophagus, and hepatocellular carcinoma by development of cirrhosis. Alcohol consumption will cause cirrhosis. Cirrhosis will eventually transform into hepatocellular carcinoma. Now diet, like colorectal carcinoma. This diet is disputed nowadays. Earlier we used to say that increased this consumption of roughage or fibers is a good thing. It prevents colorectal carcinoma, but nowadays I don't think it is accepted anymore. Obesity, it increases the mortality. Reproductive history. Increased amount of estrogen may lead to cancers of breast and endometrium. And there are some environmental carcinogens as well. Asbestos. Asbestos will lead to lung cancer. Smoke will lead to this gastric carcinoma. Dry fish, dry fish will lead to this one, nasopharyngeal carcinoma, etc. And these are some of the occupational cancers. These are some of the agents, okay, and the cancers which they may cause. Now, acquired predisposing conditions, okay. Chronic inflammation, that we know, inflammation causes tissue damage, and this tissue damage will lead to cancer. Asbestos and silicosis, okay. The etiological agent is this one, asbestos fibrous silica particles. It causes asbestosis silicosis. This may cause mesothelioma or lung carcinoma. Okay. Alcoholism will cause pancreatitis. Alcohol is a very common this factor which causes pancreatitis in our country. It may cause pancreatic carcinoma. Viruses, bacteria, and gallbladder may cause chronic cholecystitis. This may in turn cause gallbladder carcinoma. Now, gastric acid, it causes reflux esophagitis and Barrett's esophagus. Like we already know metaplasia. Barrett's esophagus is an example of metaplasia. This may cause esophageal carcinoma. Then Helicobacter pylori, it causes gastritis and ulcers. It's very common, and it may cause this gastric adenocarcinoma and Mark lymphoma. This Mark lymphoma is probably the one of the few cancers which is treated by antibiotics. Just imagine, the cancer is treated by antibiotics to Helicobacter pylori. Hepatitis B and C virus, they cause hepatitis. This hepatitis may lead to hepatocellular carcinoma. There may be precursor lesions like hyperplasia, metaplasia, dysplasia. Like dysplasia that we already know, cervical intraepithelial lesion. Or there are other examples like endometrial hyperplasia. We have something called atypical endometrial hyperplasia where the pleomorphism is very high. Okay, this also happens due to estrogenic stimulation only, and this may lead to endometrial carcinoma. Then colonic villus adenoma may progress to cancer in 50% of cases. That's okay. And then immunodeficiencies like oncogenic viruses. Like we have HPV and this Hep B virus and Hep C virus. Molecular basis of cancer, non-lethal. Okay, non-lethal genetic damage, lethal genetic damage to will kill us only. Non-lethal genetic damage due to exogenous or endogenous factors are this important for this carcinogenesis. Now, clonal expansion of a single precursor cell that has incurred genetic damage forming a tumor. Okay. This clonal expansion of single precursor cell is very important because cancers are usually monoclonal. All the cancer are these tumors. All the cells which have made the tumor, they arise from a single cell, a single precursor cell, which has accumulated the mutations. Now mutations I am seeing, so what are the four principal classes of genes which undergo mutation? These are growth promoting proto-oncogene. Number 2, growth inhibiting tumor suppressor gene. Number 3, genes that regulate programmed cell death and apoptosis. And number 4, genes responsible for DNA repair. Okay, so but obviously proto-oncogenes, they promote growth. So when they acquire gain of function to lead to cancer, and these tumor suppressor genes, they are growth inhibiting. So when they lose their function, loss of function, they will cause cancer. Now this is the molecular basis of cancer, carcinogenesis. This is a normal cell. Okay, so it acquires a driver mutation. The first driver mutation is known as initiating mutation. After that, it may acquire additional driver mutations, and then it may acquire many more mutations, many more driver and passenger mutations, which will lead to cancer. These passenger mutations are much more in number compared to driver mutation. Now, cellular and molecular hallmarks of cancer. Okay, these are some of the hallmarks, like they avoid immune destruction. We learn about them later. They evade growth suppressors. Okay, that's how they're able to grow so much. And they have replicative immortality. They produce inflammation. Yes, tumors may also produce inflammation. They activate invasion and metastasis. Obviously, that's why if metastasis happens, then only we can say they are cancers. They cause genomic instability. They resist cell death. They induce angiogenesis. Because when tumors are formed, they will need more blood supply. So that's why they will cause formation of new blood vessels. So they induce angiogenesis. Deregulating cellular energetics. This Warburg effect. We will learn about it later. They sustain proliferative signaling. Oncogenes. These are mutated genes that cause excessive cell growth. Okay, even in the absence of growth factors and other growth promoting external cues. Alright, these oncogenes. These proto-oncogenes are normal cellular genes whose products promote cell proliferation. Alright, these proto-oncogenes, when they are mutated, they give rise to oncogenes. Aberration in growth factor induced signaling pathways lead to neoplasms, and oncoproteins are proteins encoded by the oncogenes that drive increased cancer cell proliferation. These are some of the oncogenes and their mode of activation and associated with tumors. Like growth, we have 5 main categories. Okay, growth factor receptors, growth factor receptors, signal transduction proteins, then transcription factors, and at last cell cycle regulators. So these are the growth factors. Okay, these growth factors, they bind to growth factor receptors. Growth factor receptor could be tyrosine kinase receptor. In tyrosine kinase receptor, tyrosine kinase receptors, they have a cellular domain, the cytoplasmic domain, which is tyrosine kinase. And non-receptor tyrosine kinase receptor, they have a domain. They also have tyrosine kinase, but it's not attached to this receptor, transcription factors. Example are MYC, MYP, Jun, phosphoryl. This MYC is important because it activates transcription of cyclin D1. We will also learn cyclin D1. They active transcription of cyclin D1 and the genes involved in Warburg effect. They also contribute to staminess of the cell, and they increase telomerase expression. Okay, telomeres will learn this. Telomeres we'll learn about them later. In these cases, MYC is usually amplified. Okay, it is amplification most commonly occurs due to translocation. Okay, N-MYC is involved in neuroblastoma, C-MYC is involved in Burkitt's lymphoma, and L-MYC is involved in lung cancer. There are growth factors. This cancer cells has growth factors of which they have receptors. This is an oncoprotein. Okay, these are proteins only. So it's an autocrine loop. The cancer only produces the factors which helps in their own growth. So the example is PDGF and PDGF receptor, and tumor growth factor beta and E9. This epidermal growth factor receptor. Okay. Now growth factor receptors are also there, like receptor tyrosine kinase. They have an extracellular growth factor binding domain in the cytoplasmic tyrosine kinase domain, like as I have already explained, like EGFR. It's involved in breast cancer, lung cancer, glioblastoma. FLT3, RET, c-KIT, and ALK. It is involved in lung cancer and anaplastic large cell lymphoma and neuroblastoma. The second type of growth factor receptor is non-receptor tyrosine kinase. Examples are ABL1, JAK2, BTK, ZAP70. ZAP70 is this one, involved in chronic lymphoid leukemia, and JAK2, these are involved in various hematogenous lesions. They are signal transduction proteins. This is the signal transduction protein. These are the signal transduction proteins. So example is RAS. KRAS is responsible for colorectal cancer, lung cancer, and endometrial cancer. Now BRAF is responsible for papillary cancers, thyroid, various leukemia, and malignant melanoma. The fifth is cell cycle regulators. They include cyclins and cyclin-dependent kinase (CDK), that is CDK. There are two main cell cycle checkpoints. One at this G1S transition, and the other at G2M transition. The cyclins and CDKs which work at G1S checkpoint are the cyclin D, CDK0.6, cyclin E, and CDK2, and those which regulate G2M transition, they are cyclin B and CDK1. These are the cell cycle components and inhibitors that are frequently mutated in cancers. The CDK4 and cyclins, these are taken from Roberts, only you will find it there. They inactivate the cyclins. This RB and P53. These are the two main tumor suppressor genes about which we have to. We already know these are the proto-oncogenes. Okay, we learned about proto-oncogenes. These are the proto-oncogenes and their this one oncoproteins. Now we will learn something about tumor suppressor genes. Now tumor suppressor genes, the products of most tumor suppressor genes apply brakes to cellular proliferation, and abnormalities in these genes may lead to failure growth inhibition. Now, this retinoblastoma gene is the first tumor suppressor gene to be discovered. This is retinoblastoma gene. This is Nathan's two-hit hypothesis. Okay, as we already know, these tumor suppressor genes, they lead to cancer when there is loss of function of these tumor suppressor genes. Okay, so usually what happens is when both the genes derived from the parents there is mutation in both the genes derived from the parents, only then there is loss of function. So they are usually recessive. So this is Nathan's two-hit hypothesis. In this one, the genes which the baby has acquired from the parents all of them are normal only. The first hit occurs at some point of life, and the second hit also occurs at some other point of life, and it leads to retinoblastoma. First hit in one chromosome, second hit in the other chromosome, this leads to cancer. Okay, this is the sporadic form of retinoblastoma. In the familial form, the baby already has one abnormal chromosome, which has that mutated RB gene. Okay, in the course of life, the baby acquires only one hit, okay, of this mutation, which this affects the other normal chromosome and mutates the RB gene in that other normal chromosome. This leads to retinoblastoma. This whole thing happens in familial form. In sporadic form, the baby was normal from the beginning. In familial form, the baby was not normal. The baby had one abnormal chromosome. Now these are some of the selected tumor suppressor genes. Okay, this RB was the first gene, blastoma gene was the first gene, but there are some other tumor suppressor genes also, like APC, NF1, neurofibroma 1, neurofibroma 2, PTCH, P10, SMART2 and SMART4. Alright, WT1 in women's tumor, MEN1, it causes multiple endocrine neoplasia 1. Okay, and BHL, one Hippolyta syndrome. RB gene is known as the governor cell cycle and T53 is known as the GAR gene. Okay, it's known as the governor cell cycle. When hyperphosphorylated, RB exerts an anti-proliferative effect by binding and inhibiting E2F transcription factor that regulate genes required for cells to pass through the G1 to S phase cell cycle checkpoint. Growth factor signaling leads to RB hyperphosphorylation and inactivation, thus promoting cell cycle progression. The anti-proliferative effect of RB is abrogated in cancers through a variety of mechanisms like loss of function of RB mutation. This RB is obviously tumor suppressor gene. So loss of function mutation will lead to cancer. Amplification of CDK for cyclin D gene. Loss of function mutation affecting CDK inhibitors like P16 and E4A. And viral oncoproteins that bind and inhibit RB gene like E7 protein of HPV and polymer large chain. This is the picture which is showing all this thing. Growth inhibitors like TGF beta and P53, they stimulate CDK inhibitors like P16 and E4A. P16 and E4A. They inactivate the cyclin D and cyclin dependent kinase 4 and 6 and other cyclin dependent kinases. So what happens is the RB gene remains hypophosphorylated. It binds to the E2F and it doesn't lead to transcription. Okay, it blocks transcription. What happens when we get growth factors like EGF and PDGF? It activates the cyclin D and cyclin dependent kinases. It leads to more hyperphosphorylation of RB gene. This RB gene gets detached from this E2F transcription factor. It leads to active transcription. Okay, active transcription means more cell proteins, more growth, etc. Everything. So cancer will proliferate. Now some other tumor suppressor genes like APC. APC, it's known as the gatekeeper of choroidal neoplasia. You should remember that phrase. It encodes a factor that negatively regulates the WNT pathway in choroidal epithelium by promoting the formation of a complex that degrades beta catenin. This is the picture. Okay, this APC, it is attached to beta catenin. Okay, so when they get this one, APC, when it attaches to beta catenin, it destroys the beta catenin, so there is no transcription. So what happens sometimes is when you get this WNT molecules, it leads to detachment of the APC from the beta catenin, and this beta catenin lead to more of transcription and proliferation. This E-catenin also, what it does is, this E-catenin first thing, it is responsible for this one, contact inhibition of growth of cells. Okay, so what it also does is it sequesters. It attaches to the beta catenin and it doesn't let beta catenin go into the nucleus and transcribe the proteins. But this loss of E-catenin may lead to this one, translocation of the beta catenin to the nucleus, which will lead to more of transcription and increased proliferation of cells. E-catenin, cell adhesion molecule that plays an important role in contact mediated growth inhibition of cells. It also binds and sequesters beta catenin, a signaling protein that functions in WNT pathway. Okay, so this E-catenin loss of function mutation is implicated in autosomal dominant familial gastrocarcinoma. This APC, it is implicated in familial adenomatous polyposis. All right, and it may lead to early onset colon carcinoma. Now, CDKN2A, TGF beta pathway, P10, and BHL, these are some other tumor suppressor genes. Okay, the rest of the things we will see later. Okay, the next class will start from your TP53 guardian of the genome. Okay,